Hey y'all, it's me, Shnoodle. As you may know, we're getting a new Star Fox game for the Nintendo Switch 2 this month. Or more accurately, we're getting a remake of a remake of a remake of Star Fox 64. And while that has been a pretty big point of contention for many people for obvious reasons, however, there was another detail about this game that caused an even bigger uproar, being the redesigns. So what are my thoughts on them? Well, this might be a little controversial, but I absolutely adore them. And before anyone decides to dox me, please just hear me out. While I understand most people's initial reactions to these designs, and if I'm honest, I wasn't exactly sold on them either. But the more I sat and really thought about it, the more I realized a lot of criticism wasn't entirely about the quality of these designs, but instead stems from an issue all redesigns of classic characters face: people's aversion to change. Now, I'm not saying all criticism of these designs are invalid. They absolutely do have their flaws, which I will get into. However, I think they're getting far more hate than they really deserve. So let's talk about these redesigns.
Guys, in 2020, Fox might actually look like this in the animations. I don't even know what to do anymore.
Now, to explain why I like these redesigns as much as I do, there's a few things I should probably mention. Firstly, I've never actually played a Star Fox game before. And before anyone starts claiming my points are invalid because of that, I know for a fact a decent chunk of the people complaining about these redesigns have not so much as once played a Star Fox game themselves. And much like me, only really know them from something like Super Smash Bros. And even with that, I wanted to make sure I was judging these designs more fairly. So I actually spent quite a bit of time looking into the series. And honestly, doing that made me appreciate these redesigns even more. And to show this, let's start with the two characters who have seemed to have gotten the most backlash: Falco and Cat. Beginning with Falco, one of the biggest complaints I've heard is that he, quote-unquote, doesn't even look like a falcon anymore. And how do I put this? He isn't a falcon. Falco is in fact a pheasant, sharing his blue color and very distinct red facial wattles. Also, I did not know those things were called wattles until doing research for this video. Crazy stuff out there. So by slimming down the beak and leaning harder into the bird-like features, it actually makes him resemble the animal inspiration he's always had. And with that, I think this redesign perfectly accomplishes what it set out to do, without really compromising his original design. Just look at his official render. To me, it shows so much of his personality, still looking cocky and overconfident. And despite being the one who got the front line of criticism, I think it's one of the best, especially because these more animal features actually make him look more alien, which for a series based in space, I think it fits pretty well. Then we have Cat, and I know this is probably where I'm gonna lose some people, but honestly, I think this works far better as a design. Now don't get me wrong, I don't hate the original, but maybe I'm simply woke. But I've never been a big fan of the trope where the female character is basically just the girl version of the main character. So she's pink and she flirt. And the fact she looks more like a fox than she does a cat kind of proves my point. I also just don't think this approach really matches Cat as a character. This is someone who runs in a gang that previously included the likes of Falco, someone who'd be rough around the edges. So it makes way more sense to me that she looks sort of like an alleyway cat. It feels like this design actually reflects who she is as a character, and even then, despite these changes, they still leave a hint of pink in her fur. Maybe it's just me, but this only shows how much care the designers put into still having these more cartoony elements blend into this much more realistic universe they're seeming to go for. Another criticism I've seen is Nintendo is making these characters simply look too realistic. Fox has shorter legs, Falco has a more bird-like posture, and the characters are too much like their real-life animal counterpart. But personally, I don't really see this as a bad thing. It reminds me a lot of something like Zootopia, where the characters still feel stylized in many ways while leaning more heavily into the anatomy of the animals they're based on. I think what people are reacting to right now is less the designs themselves, and more simply the drastic difference between the new designs. After decades of seeing the characters look one way, any major design overhaul is naturally going to feel strange at first. Also, I don't think this is Nintendo simply chasing the realism craze that has been prevalent for the last few years. If anything, I think this is the exact opposite. Nintendo lately has been a bit more experimental than people give them credit for. Mario Wonder moving away from the new Super Mario Bros. Art style and embracing something much more expressive and colorful. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book leaning heavily into the handcrafted storybook art style. And Tomodachi Life living the dream using cel shading. To me, these Star Fox redesigns feel like another example experimenting rather than playing it safe, and adding some variety and art style to their games. And unlike something like, say, the live-action Lion King, These characters haven't lost their identity. They're still instantly recognizable. If anything, I'd argue their silhouettes stand out more than they ever have before. Now with all of that said, I do think these redesigns do have one major flaw, with that being the eyes. A huge amount of expression comes from the eyes, and I've seen artists make edits that restore the more cartoony eyes, and it arguably improves these designs. So while I like them overall, that's probably the one criticism I completely agree with. Even then though, I still don't believe this is a case of bad designs. In fact, I think this is a case we've seen recently with another Nintendo character, Donkey Kong. When his redesign was first revealed, people hated it. Now, after people have had some time to sit with it, it's received much more appreciation overall. And honestly, I think this is the same thing happening here. I think people are attached to the versions they've grown up with, and then suddenly they've completely changed. It almost feels like a betrayal, a joke. Why fix something that isn't broken? Why reject the past for something so different? But when you really look at these redesigns, they aren't rejecting the series past at all. They're actively embracing it. Just like Donkey Kong's redesign, which pulled heavily from his older appearances. And the Star Fox redesigns seem to be heavily inspired by the SNES puppets. Falco's thinner beak, Slippy's webbed hands, the overall more animal-like details. It all feels like Nintendo is revisiting the roots of these characters while still pushing them in a new direction. And honestly, I love that. They remind me a lot of something like Fantastic Mr. Fox. A little rough, a little strange, but much more distinct. And I don't care what anyone says, no one will ever make me hate you SNES puppets. Also, in an industry where so many companies are terrified of taking any artistic liberties, I think seeing Nintendo experimenting with one of their most iconic franchises is something we should encourage. Now, I know a lot of people are frustrated that this is just another Star Fox 64, which, fair, but I think this could be Nintendo trying to reintroduce this franchise to a new audience. A jumping on point for those who haven't in the past, maybe even the beginning of a new era for Star Fox. And if you don't believe me, just look at who Nintendo decided to put in the Mario Galaxy movie. No, the other one.
Fox McLoud!
The fact they're putting Fox in front of such a massive audience tells me Nintendo might actually be interested in this series again. And not just as another one-off before letting it fall back into obscurity, but as an actual franchise they want to bring back, just as they're seeming to do with something like Metroid as of lately. And if that's true, then these redesigns might just be the start of a new wave of Star Fox. Thank you all for watching. By the time this video comes out, the game has most likely been released. So if you can, please consider supporting the official release of the game. Also, if you disagree with any of my points, please let me know. I love to hear your thoughts on these redesigns. Just, please be civil about it. It's all subjective at the end of the day. But that's all for now. Consider liking, subscribing, and I'll see y'all later. Oh, yeah, almost forgot. Do a barrel roll. I know, so retro of me. Anyways, bye-bye!
She's got her hair tied up in braids and glasses perched up on her face. She is a small girl taking on a big world with an